The United States has used its veto on the United Nations Security Council to block a resolution critical of its decision to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Well, the resolution was drafted by Egypt.
The draft resolution stresses in its operational paragraphs that any attempt at changing or altering the character, status or demographic composition of the holy city of Jerusalem are null and void and must be rescinded. We have to object to such attempts in line with relevant Security Council resolutions. The draft resolution calls upon all countries not to establish diplomatic missions in the holy city of Jerusalem.
Well, Mike Hanna is at the United Nations for us. So, Mike, we heard a strong defence from the US representative at the UN there of their decision to veto this. Talk us through the highlights of that.
Well, the US ambassador making very clear her belief that, firstly, the US had a sovereign right to decide in which city it would place its capital in another state. She argued, too, though, that the UN was consistently guilty of bias against Israel, stating that the United States was recognizing the reality on the ground by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel. So, in effect, she was attacking the United Nations. In effect, she was saying that she had to protect US sovereignty. But what she also did in her comments after the vote was saying that this vote is an insult to the United States. And she said, somewhat threateningly, it is a vote that will not be forgotten. So a degree of anger there from the United States and from the other members of the Security Council, perhaps the knowledge that this result was a foregone conclusion. Few doubted that the US was going to exercise its veto. However, the resolution had been carefully phrased not to mention the United States by name, but rather to attempt to get some form of resolution that would pass that US veto. But clearly that was not going to happen, Lauren.
Mike, just stay there for a minute. We'll just have a quick listen back to what Nikki Haley had to say.
This is the first time I have exercised the American right to veto a resolution in the Security Council. The exercise of the veto is not something the United States does often. We have not done it in more than 6 years. We do it with no joy, but we do it with no reluctance. The fact that this veto is being done in defense of American sovereignty and in defense of America's role in the Middle East peace process is not a source of embarrassment for us. It should be an embarrassment to the remainder of the Security Council.
So, Mike, I mean, clearly all the other 14 who voted for this resolution had reasons for doing so. And where does this go next? I mean, as you mentioned, it was a bit of a foregone conclusion that the US would vote in that way. So what can they do in order to change this, the kind of the way things are anywhere else in the UN?
Just to pick up on the comment, though, that they had good reason to vote in favour of this resolution. Well, yes, because the resolution is in effect a restatement of the UN position on Jerusalem that has been established over decades. Where is it going to go? Well, the Palestinian leadership making very, very clear that it is going to take this matter to the UN General Assembly. There is no UN veto. It's likely to be passed by a vast majority of members, remembering that in the last vote in the General Assembly on the issue of Israel, in which it declared Israeli action in Jerusalem null and void because it was an occupying power, more than 150 states voted in favor of that. Only 6, including Micronesia, the United States and Israel, voted against. So clearly there will be strong support in the General Assembly for this resolution, given that it is a restatement of UN positions. But that is a non-binding resolution. Nobody is bound by it. The purpose of the Palestinians taking it to the General Assembly to further highlight what is clearly increasing international isolation of the United States.
In the meantime, though, the United States were still saying that they were still committed to peace in the Middle East and would work on that. What about some of the other players who might want to have an effect in the region? Do you think we might see others stepping into the role of broker there?
Well, on that matter of the United States, some perhaps still clutching at straws. We've heard from both the French ambassador and the UK ambassador after effectively condemning the Trump administration decision, also saying that now is the time for the US to push forward its much talked about peace plan. So they are attempting to say, okay, well, you can still be an honest broker in this peace process, despite the position you have taken on Jerusalem. Now, this is all very well, but the Palestinian leadership has made clear that it will not talk to any US members because of its decision on Jerusalem, what is seen as a prejudgment of the final status situation there. But there have been other parties over the years who've been involved. You've had Russia most recently, you've had the European Union, you've had the French attempting to get some traction on a peace process. But this has never lasted. The US has been the only game in town when it comes to any form of dialogue between Palestinians and Israelis, and in some cases have jealously guarded that position. Now, we've heard from President Trump the insistence that he thinks that a deal is possible, the ultimate deal, as President Trump would put it. But if you've got a situation where one of the parties thinks that you've prejudged the situation, one of the parties is not willing to talk to any of your representatives as honest interlocutors, it's very difficult to see where any US-driven peace dialogue or renewed attempts at resuscitating a long dormant peace process could get anywhere.
Mike, Hanna, thank you very much indeed.
With regard to the recently